Hello and salutations, it's me, Sal. Welcome back to Two Cents Swiss, and tonight we're doing an episode of The Way I Played, this time featuring a friend of the channel, one of the few men who has met me in real life, my good friend Gojitron. You might know him, you might recognize him. The Goji double OG, the man with the Godzilla icon.
Mm-hmm.
Here
That's
tonight.
me. How you doing?
Oh, we are living. I've got my go-go juice. I am ready to rock and roll.
How's the weather there?
Oh, well, I'm
A little moist?
a little moist, yeah. I'll wait 3 minutes and it'll be headed your way. So, yeah, for those that don't know, Gojitron and I are about, 30 minutes apart, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, not
About
too
that.
terrible. Mm-hmm. We've met up a few times and gone on toy hunts. Believe it or not, this is actually the earliest I've ever been to one of our encounters. So, I'm habitually late, which is a horrible thing. Meeting up with you is like the only time I'm ever late for anything, and it just happens that way every time. First time was not my fault, so I'll give
No.
myself that. But the second time was I was like, oh, and it was bad. So
Well, at least it's when we go toy hunting, so I can go browse while you do whatever.
right, the most previous time is while I wake up. So it was like, yeah, I'll be there at 4, and I woke up at like 4:30 or something stupid. All right. So we've got Bearman in the chat, Daniel Carhoonan, Chasing 80 Toys, Bjorn Norgensen, Jesse Hughes, Chasing 80s again. Sorry, my brain's catching up. Gojitron's here. Didn't know if you knew that. Uncle Deluxe, Kieran Ball, Keith Knight. Let's see. Scuba Pete's here. Bob Squad. And any other names? Jeff McElway's here. And Scott Hughes. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. This was originally Michael Schaefer's here. Michael Schaefer, we just started, literally just started. Don't worry about it. We'd had this in the works for a little while, and we are gonna go for 8, and then Tony was like, "I'm gonna go at 8:30." I was like, "I'm gonna go at 6:30 then." So for those that are able to, please share the link in the chat for Analog Toy Stream when it comes up. Just Plain Stuff is here as well. So, one super chat from Jim says, "Can't attend, but wanted to drop some support. Appreciate it." All right, so let me get out our script here. I'm kidding. It's not a script. It's just a list of
the
things.
Hard-hitting questions.
That's right. It's high impact here. This is
no softballs.
That's right. This is what was that show? 2020 or something like that.
Yeah.
All right. So before we move any further along, I've said who you are, but let the fine people at home know who you are, where they can find you online, should they choose to do so.
I am Carl, aka Gojitron, and I do not have a YouTube channel, unlike many of the people who've been on the show. But you can find me on Instagram at Gojitron. That's about it. That's all I do right now. Right now, that's all I do.
That's right. And having a channel is not a prerequisite for coming on here. I just have to like you and all that kind of stuff. So, or at least know who you are. I don't, I get some randoms sometimes asking me to come on. I'm like, I don't know who you are. So, but that's part of the fun, I guess. So, all right. So the name of the game is The Way I Played. It's basically just talking about toys and growing up and playing with them and all that. It's I wouldn't say a goalless show or anything like that, but it's the goal is really just to relive some memories, have some fun.
Right.
So let's get some background on the one and only. Let's learn about Carl a little bit, like where you're from, when you were born, all that kind of stuff.
I was born.
Last word of social.
All my passwords, yeah. I am a born and bred Rhode Islander, still here, which is a real place, Mr. Schaefer. Thank you. I was born quite some time ago, 1967 to be exact. So I'm probably one of the older muckers in the community. always loved toys. Always loved action figures. I've had this is my third major collection in my lifetime. So I've always been around toys, cartoons, uh, movies, comic books, all that stuff.
Outstanding. You're from Rhode Island. For those that I'm sure everyone knows, but it's like the home of GI Joe. Like
Yes.
anytime I look at Facebook Marketplace, it's like a mecca for GI Joe. So, but there's also a lot
Ah,
of people who have like random stuff from like the early
mhm.
aughts, like vintage, original. I'm like, no, no,
And now let's not forget home of Valaverse.
that's true. It is now the home of
Hmm.
Aliverse. I've spent many a day there. I actually spent this past Friday there. I got off work Friday morning and drove down and had a big old delivery show up. So spent a day doing that. That was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
I am still finding cardboard underneath my fingernails, but yep, it's a great time to be alive and be in this area for sure. So
Hmm.
now something you said kind of tickled my ear a little bit. You said this is the third collection you've had.
Yes.
Uh, I myself, this is my third collection that I've started.
Hmm.
Um, if you if you like I count the childhood toys as your first collection because
Right.
you amass quite a lot.
Exactly. Hmm.
So I'd like to hear your story on how you, if you feel like sharing, if you how you kind of went about like selling, and then collecting again.
Well, the first collection were my childhood toys from the 70s, late 70s into the early 80s. Then, when all the deregulation toy lines hit, I considered myself an adult collector by then. I was in high school. So I just continued on with Masters of the Universe, Transformers, and Thundercats, and all that stuff. It was mid to late 90s. I still had all that stuff when Beast Wars came out. And also the internet. So I started going online and exploring all the different aspects of Transformers that I had missed because the one line that I was always a completist on originally was Transformers. I had the entire Generation 1 US release line from 84 to 89, whenever that was. So when I went online, I discovered all the Japanese and European exclusives that I didn't know about that were now available via eBay and other avenues. And I decided at that point to keep my Generation 1 collection, continue with Beast Wars, and become sort of a Transformers completist and try to fill in all the gaps in my collection that I had missed. So to that end, I sold off everything else that I had at that point. So Star Wars, Thundercats, Masters of the Universe, all that stuff was sold off, and I reinvested in just Transformers. And I wound up with about 11 to 1200 different Transformers from America, Japan, US. I started posting in online message boards, Transformer related message boards. That's where the name Gojitron came from. I created that because you needed a silly screen name to be on a message board back then. I got known for my collection. I ended up joining a website which no longer exists. I became a moderator on the website, eventually an admin on the website. I also was involved in the toy section. So I would do photographs, reviews of all different Transformers toys, post them on the website. That was up until about early 2000s, 2004, around there. A couple of things happened. One pertaining to online, the environment in the Transformers community was getting very toxic at that time.
You
Uh,
don't say.
which is something we can relate to now
Right.
still
Yeah.
enjoyably. Uh, so that kind of soured me on the whole fandom thing. Also, something very personal happened around that time. My father was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer after having been healthy his entire life. And between his diagnosis and his death, it was only about 6 months.
Oh
So that
wow.
kind of hit me hard. Yeah, that hit me kind of hard. And between that and the toxicity of the fandom, I just said the hell with it, and I sold everything off. I wasn't in a good place at that time to continue collecting, continue being in the fandom. So all that stuff was gone. Maybe about 4 years ago, I started watching various YouTube channels.
Mm.
I noticed the trends in the toy industry that were happening with all the retro stuff, all the original lines coming back in some way, shape, or form. So that inspired me to start Collection 3.0. So here we are.
Yeah, that's quite a roller coaster there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not. That's I really I understand how kind of life gets in the way with things. It's
Hmm.
nothing as I guess I didn't have anything like that happen, but I was like, oh, I don't know
Hmm.
where I'm gonna be in 5 years,
Yep.
so that's how Collection 2 kind of got sold off.
Yeah.
But
Plus, at that time, I was also on the swing shift. We discussed that a little last time we met up. So I was
mhm,
rotating every 2 weeks from days to nights, and that's not really good for your mental health or your physical health.
yeah,
So
it takes
I'm off that now. So
yeah, that really
yeah.
takes a toll on you. Like even being on mids, you really shouldn't. It's no one should really be on mids for that long or for any duration of time because your body naturally needs sunlight and needs things. But
Yeah.
I prefer my night shift, so I don't have to deal with people in the back office. I can just do my job unhindered.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not good for you. And rotating every 2 weeks really messes with your circadian rhythm and all that. Like it's people develop
Absolutely. Not
insomnia doing
not
that.
healthy.
Yeah. So before we move any further, we have a super chat from Connor Fuller. If I can click on it, there we
Thanks,
go. He
Connor.
says, "Just home and a little drunk. Can't stay, and we'll watch the replay. I just wanted to say hi and chat Goji and Jen. So thank you, Connor. We
Cheers,
appreciate
Connor.
it." So, Daniel Carhoonan actually says he actually started hunting for G1 Transformers in 2014, but it's nowhere as big as Gojitron's old collection. I'm pretty sure you had everything, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as U.S. releases, yes. Not all the Japanese releases because a lot of those were rare and expensive, but I had them in various forms like knockoffs or there was a series called Brave Series in Japan, which reused a lot of the Japanese Transformer molds. So instead of buying the actual Transformers, I would get the Brave versions, and they were a little bit cheaper. Someone like Jody would know all about that stuff. Did we lose Sal?
I do that all the time. All the time. Like, I'll hit mute so I can take a drink of coffee so no one hears me glug glug, and then I'll forget to unmute and I'm sitting here talking. So, um, what I was saying is for things like Transformers, like for as little as I know about Motu, um, and I'm learning, like I'm learning more and getting to know things, but it's like I'll go to say something in a video and I'll have to think like, hold on, is that right? And I'll have to like look it up or something. But I
Hmm.
am learning. I know even less about Transformers,
Yeah.
and I guess I would say like I know what I would call like the Bay formers, like I
Hmm.
which I from my understanding he used most of the or not most of but most of the characters he used I should say were from the Arc crew, like the original.
Right.
So if it's not like one of them,
Hmm.
uh like they're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is like Flip Top McGee, and I'll be like, who's that?
Yeah.
So
It's a fairly dense mythology. Yeah. It's a lot to get into.
yeah, so my knowledge, my like working knowledge that I kind of can cherry pick from begins and ends with Beast Wars. Like that was
Hmm.
my first real entry into Transformers.
Yep.
But
And a
uh,
far superior series than Generation One, I have to say, as
yeah,
far as the show goes, the cartoon, the storytelling, the writing, the voice acting, it was all really superior to Generation One.
everyone always wants to crap on the animation. I'm like, well, yeah, it was like very early CGI.
Yeah,
Like,
of its time.
yeah, so it shows its age, but I also think that what I would call, I guess, the G1 of Beast Wars, like the toys, run circles around G1 Transformers in terms of
Mhm.
being able to play with them.
Yep.
But Uncle Deluxe has a question. He says, "Here's a
Mhm.
question for you, Goji. If you could only collect one line, which would it be and why?"
It was, and probably still would be Transformers, just because of the mythology, and I just really like the concept of the two or more toys in one. That always struck me as something special that I always liked. So yeah, Transformers. Sorry, Michael Schaefer. Transformers. I know Michael hates Transformers.
Bob Squad says he wants a HasLab Flip Top McGee.
That'll be $650 in one easy payment.
Yeah, tier for the first unlock tier at 50,000, you'll get a transformation out of it instead of a brick.
Right.
So it transforms from a dinghy to a dinghy with oars. But let's see. Scott Hughes says, I still have all my G1 collection, but bittersweet selling everything to help buy tooling for my own new business. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's starting up his business, and I
Mhm.
can't even fathom that. Like, seeing what he and Bobby are doing, like I'm always considered going into, business for myself once I'm done with my current job, and then I see that and I'm like, ooh, that seems like a lot. I don't know if I
Yeah.
can do that. But Jeff McElwee says, why is Ectotron the best Transformer?
I don't know. I don't have an Ectotron.
Jesse Hughes asks, has there ever been a Transformers Godzilla crossover or toy? That seems
No.
like a no-brainer.
No. There was a knockoff back in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's called Daylung Master. It's really rare now, but it was sort of a Grimlock Godzilla hybrid. That would be the closest thing to an actual Gojitron toy, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, nothing official, unfortunately. Blame Toho being stingy with the license.
That just seems like a no-brainer, though. A kaiju versus a giant robot, like.
Right. I mean, basically take Trypticon and remold them a little bit, and there you go.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's probably someone out there that's taken, I don't know, like Megatron, and I mean it's a T-Rex, it's not a Godzilla, but I'm sure someone's painted
Mhm.
him up, probably added the little
Oh
fins
yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
so I don't know. It's money waiting there to get made. They're both Japanese companies. They could very easily
Hmm.
do that. So, I mean, we
Absolutely.
in the last 5 years we saw Batman versus the Ninja Turtles. So
Hmm.
and now we're seeing Cobra Kai and the Ninja Turtles, which sure, Jan. Um,
Hmm.
so let's see. So you said that Transformers has really been the big thing. So that's
Right.
clearly something you collected then and you collect now.
Hmm.
I want to take the Wayback Machine, as they say, to before all of that. Like, what
Hmm.
were you into when you were a kid, and that you're still into now?
Superheroes. So
Superhero.
some of the first toys I remember having were these 2-inch tall static figures created in 1966 by Ideal. I believe they were hand-me-downs from older cousins. My mother came from a family of 9, so I have dozens of cousins, and I got a lot of hand-me-down toys. And I didn't know who these figures were when I had them, but when I learned to read, I turned them over, and the names were on the bottom of them, and they were Superman, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and the Flash.
Hmm.
And for years, I played with them, I did not knowing who they were until 1974 when Super Friends came on TV. And then I made the connection and said, oh, that's who these are. And Super Friends led me into comic books. And then from there, that all led me into Mego. Mego's World's Greatest Superheroes, which was probably the most important toy line of my childhood because
Hmm.
I had, except for Conan and Tarzan, who I really didn't consider superheroes, I had every figure from that collection. I had the Batmobile, I had a couple of other vehicles. So, yes, superheroes is something that's been with me since as far back as I can remember. And still now, you can see some Marvel Legends back here. I still love superheroes. So,
Awesome. Yeah, I find that to be like, especially that was the case with me. Like, I had a ton. I've talked about it probably ad nauseum, but I've had a ton of toys as a kid that I didn't
Hmm.
know who they were.
Yeah.
So I'm
Hmm.
like, if if I saw the Flash and didn't know who he was, like, that's the thing. Like, I knew who the Flash was, but I'd never read a comic and I'd never seen him on a cartoon. Like, but
Hmm.
I knew who the Flash was. I knew what he did.
Hmm.
So, like, if I'm looking at the Flash, like, if I didn't have any frame of reference, didn't even have a name, I'd be like, well, he's got a lightning bolt on his chest. He uses lightning, like,
Right.
so. Oh
Yeah.
boy,
You can kind of put two and two together when you're a kid without any context most of the time.
that lets you know like just how good of a design that must be if you're able to
Right.
kind of figure it out. So
Hmm.
Jeff McAway has a question for you. He says, if you could make a Transformer design concept backstory, what would it be?
I would make that Godzilla transformer and try to figure out how that would come into being. Try to connect, Kaiju to Cybertron somehow, because there are already some Kaiju in Cybertronian lore. Like the Terracons are basically Kaiju, the guys that make Abominus.
Hmm.
So I'd kind of make the Godzilla transformer an extension of that somehow, or
Yeah,
relate him to Trypticon somehow.
yeah. Wolfie 762 and Bob Squad kind of the same idea. Mecha God Goji and Mecha Godzilla could transform into something. So
Yes.
again, that's just a no-brainer. Like,
Mhm.
but
I would have if I did that, I would have him transform into a starship rather than a base. I'd
mhm,
rather have him be, mobile on a galactic scale rather than just turn into a battle base.
yeah. Scott Hughes lets us know that those ideal 66 superheroes are money on eBay right
Oh yeah,
now. I
yes,
believe it. That's anytime I'm like, oh man, these toys are so expensive. I start looking at things like Lone Ranger and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, geez, I'm crow. All right, well, hmm,
I tend to not look at the values of things I sold 20 years ago now
hmm,
because it would probably just make me cry.
yeah, yeah. That's that.
I mean, I
That's
don't regret selling anything, but I may regret not holding on to it longer and getting more for it. That's all.
That's we tell people all the time is like the name of our game is to not, you know, you don't collect to sell it later kind of thing, because you get to a
Right.
point where you amass so much
Hmm.
that the amount of time it would take you to sell everything out individually to get, the second market price or the going rate for it,
Hmm.
we'd probably all be dead. Like,
Right.
it would take so long, so you end up having to do a wholesale or selling it in bulk and all that, and you'll get a fraction of a fraction. Like
Hmm.
the collection number two that I sold either went to, I think I sold it at Time Capsule. I'd have to see the storefront. Um,
Yep.
I'm pretty sure I sold it all to them, and
Hmm.
I only got like $300 for all of it, and it was a collection
Yeah.
probably worth close to 2,000.
Right.
So, and that's just what happens. So
Mhm.
if you're collecting to be like, I'm gonna put my kids through college, it's like, well, I hope your kids are kids now, and you start selling now because that's how long it's gonna take. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
When I sold my stuff, I actually did sell it individually on eBay. I got the most I could at the time for it.
yeah,
And I opened it up to international shipping. So right now, my old collection is literally scattered to the four corners of the earth. I must have shipped stuff to 20 or 22 different countries. So,
hmm,
I mean, that's kind of cool that the stuff I used to have is now everywhere. I mean, maybe someone watching this has something that I used to own. I don't know.
yeah. Chris Miwa, Chasing 80 Toys, has a question. He says, Goji, which Transformer character can you relate to the most and why?
Hmm, good question.
Yeah, just pick one out of the thousands of characters on the spot.
Oh, can I relate to the most? Maybe Grimlock, because sometimes I just feel like an idiot. And Grimlock is most of the time an idiot, so I don't know.
And he
So,
spends most of his time as a T Rex, which is kind of like
right.
Godzilla.
Yeah.
So we had that conversation at Toy Vault a couple weeks ago, and it's something I just kind of noticed. Anytime they do like a Grimlock that can't transform, it's always the T-Rex version.
Right.
Like,
I mean, that's
I think
kids love dinosaurs.
Right. He's immediately recognizable that way because someone
Right.
like me who's a normie, like, yeah, I know who Grimlock is, but if you showed me his robot form, I'd be like, I know it's a Dinobot, but I don't know which one. So,
Right.
but oh boy. So I don't know. If I had to pick a Transformer, uh, Ironhide, that's who I would pick. Just
Uh-huh.
because I like Ironhide. I don't know anything about
Yeah.
him. Maybe
Actually, I'm going to change my answer. I'm going to change my answer. At this point in my life, I relate to Cup most of all. Because I'm getting older, and I'm getting surly and impatient, and my knees hurt, and I think Cup is the guy I can relate to most.
That's right. That's well, to keep with the theme. I'm my Transformer spirit animal is Flip Top McGee. So, alrighty.
Is he a triple changer?
Flip Top McGee.
Mm.
He flips his top. So, and he's in, I don't know, McDonald's colors or something with a weird shaped M, like just enough to not get sued by McDonald's.
Right.
So, let's see. Jeff McElwee asks, "Who was your favorite superhero and who is it now?" Out of the thousands
I
of superheroes on the spot.
yeah. I always liked Thor because I loved I love Kirby first of all, and I love the mythology that Kirby built around that, and Stanley, I guess. And I love Thor's character design with the hammer, the winged helmet, the classic Thor, not the movie Thor. I like the classic Thor, the one that Bobby Ballard designed. I have that one back here, the 80th anniversary Thor. So
That's
Thor's always been a favorite. He was one of my favorite Migos because he was the most visually interesting out of all the Migos, and that just carried through that I like Thor. On the DC side, probably Hawkman for the same reason, very visually interesting.
Yeah.
The classic Silver Bronze Age Hawkman with the big wings on his headpiece and the mace. So yeah, those two.
Yeah. That's Hawkman is one of those, like, I didn't know who he was until, what was it, the like 2001, is that when the Justice League cartoon came out, I think, in the early odds,
Yeah,
late
around there. Yeah.
90s? Yeah. I didn't know who he was till then, but and even then I was like, oh, I only know who he is. I didn't know his backstory. But when I started actively really getting into comics in like 20, I'm in such a bad habit of saying like 20 and then following it with a 10, but it was like 2007, 2008. So I was about to say 2008, which I guess is not wrong, just sounds weird in the ear. And I learned about like, oh, like they, he has to find Hawk Girl, they fall in love, they die, they reincarnate, and then I'm like, that's such a cool concept. Like, it's something you look at and you see him, and it's not inherent to what he looks like. It's something you have to know, and I'm like, that's such a cool concept for him. It's something I don't think about a whole lot. Is like some guys like yourself grew up with Stan Lee and Kirby as the designers. You know what I mean? Like they were the creators. And then I don't know if it makes you sad or not to know it's like I had to grow up with Rob Liefeld. Like when I was a kid, that's who was making comics, was Rob Liefeld. And, well, I also had Jim Lee, so win some, lose some.
Yeah, well, that's what reprints are for. That's what reprints and collected editions are for. You can go back and read all the good stuff.
That's right. And I know I just took a shit on Rob Liefeld, but my favorite superhero then is my favorite now, and that's Cable. So, admittedly, though, I was exposed to Cable through the television. That's a pun intended because I saw him in the animated series. That's where I got where I learned who he was. But as I was Grimlock then, I'm Grimlock now. I was an idiot. I thought his power was time travel. I didn't understand that his power was something else. It's just, he travels through time. That's his mutant power. He travels through time. But whatever. So he's my favorite. But is I was thinking about, oh, your mutant powers manifest when you're a teenager. I'm like, imagine that. You're just like 13. You're like, oh, yawn, and there's a dinosaur next to you. What the fuck? Um, all right. So you've already mentioned that you sold collection 1 and 2.
Mhm.
Um, and normally I would have skipped this question because I'm like, oh, you sold collection 1 and 2. But as recent events showed me, it is possible. Is there anything left from your childhood? Like anything that didn't make it onto eBay's and all that?
There is one thing that I still have it right here, not an action figure, but I've had this since I was born. This little baby doll.
Oh
That
wow,
is
look at that.
my one surviving childhood toy, made date stamped the same year I was born. I have pictures of me when I was an infant with this. So he's the sole survivor. He's called a Plumpy.
I
He's a
believe it.
Plumpy doll. So he's the only one. Everything else is gone.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that if you were walking around the collection, that would be like, what the hell is that? Because you've got
Yeah,
superheroes, Star Wars,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
that's
Godzilla, Megatron, He-Man, and Plumpy. Sure, they all go together. That's fine.
yeah, sure. So let's see. Is there anything that you had as a kid that you didn't play with or didn't like, but you appreciate now that you're an adult?
I don't think there's anything I didn't appreciate. There's probably stuff I took for granted, like stuff that I had in just heaps of when I was a kid that you can't get anymore. For example, just good quality little plastic dinosaurs. You
Hmm.
can't really get these anymore. You can still get a version of these at Walmart and stuff, but the molds have degraded so much over the past 40 years. They're not the quality they used to be.
Right.
And I had dozens of these when I was a kid, and I
Hmm.
played with them all the time. I love those things. And also things like, you know, these Chinosaurs.
Hmm.
I used to get all kinds of bags of these again when I was a kid, and you really can't get them in any sort of good quality anymore. So I guess I appreciated them, but I kind of took them for granted that they'd always be around, and they're not around anymore. So
Yeah, that's I think most kids had a butt ton of those dinosaurs, like they're blow molded or
yeah,
whatever, they're hollow.
hmm
And as someone who actively collects, we'll have to go on like a real toy hunt one day instead of just going to Toy Vault.
hmm
Um, but whenever I go to Walmart, like I don't just look at the action figures. Like I'll go to the aisle over where kind of the generic
hmm
toys are and all that. And
oh yeah, definitely.
yeah,
Yep.
I see these plastic containers that are like full of dinosaurs, and they come with like little trees and things. And I'm like,
Yep.
back in my day, I was like, they used to come in like a hollow volcano. You
Yeah.
get like a big diorama piece for them or something, and
Yep.
they just don't do
Exactly.
that anymore. So
Right.
that's
And also, I like to hit the diecast aisle as well because all through the past 2 years, when there's been no action figures, I
hmm
often go over and I look at the Hot Wheels, and
yeah,
the Hot Wheels are almost always in stock, and they're always refreshing the assortment. So I don't know, I've got like
hmm
100 Hot Wheels just because I hate going out looking for toys and coming home empty-handed. So
yep.
sometimes I'll spend $2 and get a couple of Hot Wheels that are cool.
hmm Oh, I've been looking at. I haven't gotten any yet because I'm not really a card collector guy, but I have been looking at those the diecast ones. There'll be like I think it's Jada that makes them. There'll be like the
Yes.
Batmobile. There'll be like a little diecast Batman. I'm like,
Yep.
like I'm looking at them, but I haven't pulled the trigger on any of them yet. I have a hard time displaying anything that rolls on its own. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm much the same way where I went to Walmart this morning around like 8, something like that, because I needed to buy groceries. And I went to the toy aisle. I'm like, I don't see anything I want.
hmm
There's nothing here. And then I was like, well, and like I I can pretty much just walk down an aisle and know if I'm going to get anything. And then
hmm
I'll be like, well, time to start looking for other people. And so I ended up buying 4 toys for Ryan's son Gavin. So
Yep.
it's because I'm always looking for myself and other people.
hmm Yeah.
Uh, the struggles of hunting and art. And so I know I said earlier for people listening that this area is kind of like a mecca for GI Joe, and it is like it. You can go on Facebook Marketplace right now and you'll find vintage Joe. Pretty much everyone's got it because it's Rhode Island. It's the home of GI Joe.
Yep.
You would think with Hasbro HQ being like 40 minutes from here, or from me, like 15, 20 minutes from you, maybe. You would think that we would have amazing distribution. Pegs would be packed with everything. There are 2 Walmarts near me, and I'm pretty sure they've been sharing the same grief cargo for the last 6 months. Like,
yeah,
we get
exactly.
nothing here.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I'm
the problem is all the freight comes in, as you know, all the freight comes in on the West Coast and has to make its way over. Even though the headquarters is here, the product is not.
Yeah, that's I learned that from Bobby, is that it hits California pretty much, and then trickles its way this way. But it's not like, like the Walmart can place its order, like we'll take two boxes or whatever. But there'll be a Walmart somewhere else that'll be like, oh, we'll take 5, but then they'll hold on to 6 or whatever. Like it just kind of, it's like Bilbo says, it's too little butter over too much bread. Like it starts real thick and it kind of thins out as it goes.
Right.
So, and Scuba Pete says, "Paw shuck it." So, for those that only hear it on documentaries from not natives, it's pronounced Pawtucket, like P''tucket.
Yeah,
so
Pawtucket.
Yeah, that's a interesting. And everywhere's like that. Everywhere's like that, where there's clearly like how it would be pronounced versus how it is pronounced. So,
right.
And it's always interesting. There's some places from my home state that are real words, like in the English language, but they're pronounced differently. Just so that way, it's like, oh, we know he's not from here because he didn't say it that way. So it's just a weird thing that happens. But all right, so was there what did you covet as a kid? Like, was there any toy line that you were aware of that you really wanted and were able to acquire later in life? You're like, oh man, this toy sucks. This is not a good toy at all.
I don't think. Well, I didn't have very many Shogun Warriors, the die-cast ones. I had the big plastic ones, the Jumbo Machinders, but I always saw the pictures of the die-cast ones in comic books. And because I was doing Star Wars and Micronauts heavily at that time, and there was only so much money to go around to spend on the kid, I didn't get a lot of Shogun Warriors. So that was the one vintage toy line that I sort of missed out on. And these days, those are impossible to get because they had so many small parts and pieces and missiles. It's almost impossible to get those in any sort of mint condition for anywhere near a reasonable price. So I'd say that's the one thing I missed out on. But I don't think there's anything that I acquired later in life that I was disappointed in. I mean, there's a lot of modern toys I acquired I'm disappointed in, but there wasn't a lot vintage.
Yeah. That's I recently experienced that myself with the Funko Turbo Man.
Oh yeah,
it's
review coming this Christmas.
Yeah, it's actually it's coming
thumbs down.
Yeah, it's coming out on Christmas Day.
Okay.
So it's not really a review. That's part of it, but there's a bigger reason why that video got made. But if I tell you now, then you won't watch the video. So
I'd still watch the video.
Yeah. But basically, it's like a $40 toy, and it's like there's a reason why I bought it, and it fulfills that reason. So I'm like, okay, money well spent. But if I was buying it for a kid as a toy, it's an awful toy. So
yeah, it didn't look that impressive in the box. I look at it every time I go into Walmart because it's always in stock because no one's buying it.
Yeah,
and I look at it and not for me.
It'll drop down to like $10 after Christmas. The reason why I'm fairly confident with doing no research, but I'm fairly confident the reason why it's even available is it's the 25th anniversary of the movie.
Right.
Which I haven't made it public yet, but on the 20th, which I know is a Monday night, but it's as close to the holidays as I could get without being on the holidays because Christmas Eve and Christmas fall on the weekend this year. There's going to be a live watch party on this channel of Jingle All the Way.
Oh,
So
cool.
myself, Bobby Valla, and Jeff Hicks from World Class Bullshitters, and Matt Swafford from Reclaimers Vintage, and possibly a pop-in from Michael or Ryan. They're kind of tentative, but the other three I have nailed down. We're going to watch the movie and give live commentary. For those that
Nice.
don't know, Jingle All the Way it's a Christmas movie and it's fun. It's like, okay, cool. Like the last third act, it enters the theater of the absurd and just goes high and right and weird.
Yeah.
But when you watch this movie, you'll be like, oh, so Phantom Menace wasn't Jake Lloyd's worst movie. So
yeah, I just watched it actually about a week and a half ago. My wife and I watched it, and I completely forgot that was Jake Lloyd.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're right. It goes off the rails at the end of it.
Yeah, real fast. There's some special effects in that movie. You're like, wow, this is like after Star Wars, and we're okay. This is 3 years before the Matrix. Okay, so also rest in peace, Phil Hartman. That was like the last movie that came. Like there was one movie released posthumously, but that was the last movie he was alive for when it came out. So yeah. Also, a fun fact: they originally wanted Joe Pesci for Sinbad's role.
Huh.
So that would have been a whole different movie. I
Yeah.
don't think he wouldn't have been able to not swear. I don't think. But
Yeah, I was just in Toy Vault yesterday, and they do have, if you want to compliment your Turbo Man, they have Funko Pops of Arnold and Sinbad. If you want to grab those and sort of do a whole Turbo Man display.
oh god.
They have Myron in the supervillain costume. I forget what it's called. Yeah, and dressed up as Turbo Man.
I don't intentionally buy Funko Pops. The last one I intentionally bought was a Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z. I was meeting Chris Sabat, the guy that voices Piccolo, and excuse me, like an idiot. Like, well, I didn't know he was going to be at the convention I was at. I was there for all 3 days. And I guess like they didn't put him on the roster at the convention because he was only going to be there for Saturday, the day in the middle. And you had to follow him on Twitter to know that or something. So I was like, oh crap. And I was looking around the convention for something because I was like, oh, I don't want to be that guy that just gets a photo or something. Like I want, I love Dragon Ball Z and I love the characters that he voices, and a Funko Pop was the only thing I could find. So I was like, damn it. Guess I'm buying this. And the funny thing is I had seen it the day before because it was like just on it. They had a few Funko Pops and various other things at this particular retailer. They marked it up 50% because he was there that day. So I went from what would have been like the $15 one to spending $30 on it because he was there. So, but I still have it. So screw it, I guess. But so playtime, right?
Yes.
Playtime. That's the reason we're here. So I want to know kind of how playtime evolved for you. Usually a lot of people ask some great questions that I forget to ask, but I'm just kind of roll all of them into one question and we'll just talk it out. So we have the concept of bath toys, like water toys, pool toys, especially in Rhode Island, beach toys, for example, outside versus inside, and how all that. So let's start at the front and work our way back. Like, was there anything that you had designated as a beach toy, like outside of regular, like beach ball, sandcastle stuff?
No. Just usually just sand molds. We weren't, believe it or not, we weren't big beach goers. My family, even though we lived in the ocean state, we weren't really big on beaches. But when we did go, it was just pretty much sand molds and pails and shovels and things like that. But I did, pick up we were talking about it in the Scuba Pete, the way I played, about buying the tourist trap, the sharks and the octopuses and all that stuff. So every time we went to a beach area, I would stop in one of those shops and get one of those rubber sharks or what have you. So I probably played with those in the sand as well.
Yeah. Talk about a markup. The same toy shark you could have gotten inland for half the price.
Yeah.
So what about like outside versus inside? Like, was there anything that you had as a kid that you didn't take outside because this is very complicated or too small, I might lose it?
Early on, I would take all my Migos outside. We had a
Mm-hmm.
big backyard, so I
Mm-hmm.
take them outside the Batmobile, and I had the Spider-Man Crime Lab van, and I'd take them all out. My friends would come over, and we'd play with the Migos. But early on, I realized that if any of my toys got broken or dirty, or if I lost pieces, I'd get very upset. So
Mm-hmm.
outside play didn't last that long. It didn't last past Mego. I certainly didn't take any Micronauts or Star Wars figures outside because I would have lost the pieces and I would have been devastated.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, early on with Migos, I went outside, and I remember sometimes the cloth costumes would get dirty,
Mm-hmm.
so I'd undress them and I'd wash them in the sink and I'd hang them out to dry because I didn't want any dirty spots on the superhero costumes.
Yeah.
So yeah, outside early on, but then we ended that toward the late '70s when we started to get into the 3 3/4 inch, the smaller stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's a Scuba Pete quickly just says rubber shark, which made me think of the SNL skit Land Shark.
Yeah,
Who is it? Mailman. No, it's not. Plumber.
Candygram.
Yeah. You better not be that land shark. But Bjorn Jorgensen says, I took everything outside. If I lost anything, Mama Jorgensen just told me, told you so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
it.
that's pretty much how everything went. Like, if I ever broke anything, my parents were like, oh, well, that
Right.
sucks.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I very, very rarely ever got a replacement toy for anything that broke. So,
Yeah, no do overs.
yeah.
Once you own it, it's your responsibility.
Yeah, that's so as growing up when I did Jurassic Park kick, so I was really into all the Jurassic Park dinosaurs and all that. I still have my Bull Rex. I just realized I never turned on my camera. Boink. Um, just that way people have something to look at. But
Hmm.
the I had the Bull Rex, which is the split belly, eat everything, all that. But I had these like little, they were all kind of soft, like had stuffing in them and all that. And
Hmm.
like most dogs from the 80s and 90s, they loved the plastic. And as a kid, I would just leave something on the floor, it'd get chewed up or whatever. And I remember one
Yeah.
of my little Rexes had been torn to shreds, like just absolutely demolished. And I remember like crying as a 4-year-old would do,
Hmm.
and asking my dad, like, for a new one. He was like, use your imagination, and just kind of walked away. So,
Imagine there's a T-Rex.
yeah,
Use your hand.
right. In hindsight, it should have just been a T Rex that the other T Rex ate, but I'm
Mhm.
not wasn't very smart. So, Dad, I need to use the lead plate to make blood. Um, but fun stuff. So, inside outside.
Mhm.
Um, how did you ever mix your toy lines together, or was it a if this is Batman kind of thing?
Oh no, I mixed them. I mixed them in certain ways. So I was very cognizant of not only scale but articulation. So around 77, 78, I was into Micronauts and Star Wars. Two very different lines as far as design and articulation. So as we know, after Star Wars, a lot of companies jumped in on the sci-fi craze and started buying up all these other licenses. And I bought a lot of those toys. So Mattel had Battlestar Galactica and Flash Gordon. And those two toy lines were both 5 POA, adventure people, Star Wars style. So those toys would supplement my Star Wars collection. They'd end up in the cantina, or I had the Sears cantina, the cardboard, more sizely backdrop. So I'd take the Flash Gordon, Battlestar Galactica guys, and put them around Moss Isley, and they would fit in with the Star Wars guys because they were 5 POA. Meanwhile, Mego came out with Buck Rogers in the 25th Century and the Black Hole, and both those toys use the Microman, Micronaut style O-ring, the jointed knees, jointed elbows, and I would use those guys to supplement my Micronauts.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I was reading the Micronauts comic from Marvel, and that was the mythology for Micronauts at the time, before deregulation, no cartoons. So a lot of the Black Hole and Buck Rogers figures would be stand-ins for comic book characters that didn't have actual toys. So that's kind of how I split them up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was,
So if the articulation matched, then they could play together. But I rarely mixed, the Star Wars and the Micronauts. With something like the Black Hole, they had the Vincent and Maximilian.
mm-hmm.
Those guys could go play in the Star Wars universe because they would hang around the land of the Jawas, and they
Right.
would be, part of the droid sale.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I kind of segregated the different articulations.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was kind of a big thing. Like it was hard to have a 5 POA fight with like a GI Joe.
Yeah.
But for me, scale was a big thing. I think that's pretty much everyone though. Like if you have 5.5, like He-Man fight Cobra Commander, it's kind of a quick battle. So, but, yeah. That's,
of course, there was one toy where scale didn't matter, and that was Shogun Warriors Godzilla. He fought everybody.
Yep. Big scary monsters.
Yep.
That's the theme, if you will. That's nothing beats a big scary monster.
Yep.
So let's see about like playtime in general. Like kind of your go-to. Was there a story or something you had kind of created on your own that you played every time, or did you try to make a new story every time?
I would make up different scenarios, and I would play them out, throughout the day. And sometimes I would stop in the middle, and when it was time for supper or time for bed or whatever, and I would just mostly I would play in my room. So it wasn't like I was leaving toys all over the house. I would leave everybody as they were, and I would continue the story the next day. So I would do like a to be continued, where we'd be in the middle of the battle, everybody would freeze, Toy Story style. I'd go to bed, wake up the next morning, and continue.
Yeah. So when you set up those play environments, because kids evolve over time. It goes from in my hands in front of my face to okay, let me set up this whole thing. Like this is bad guys side, good guys side. This is the battlefield in the middle, so to speak. Did it ever expand past like a designated play area? Like was there like a corner of the living room that you played in, or was it only your bedroom? Did it ever expand through the house, or was it just an isolated area?
Sometimes, yeah. We growing up, my parents never owned a house. We rented, and I lived in about 3 different places. So every time we moved, there would be different, nooks and crannies, different rooms I could explore with toys. So yeah, sometimes I could expand out of my room and find another little corner of the house to play in that wasn't in anyone's way, wasn't in I would make sure I wasn't in a travel path, because I didn't want anybody stepping on anything. I didn't want anything broken. So I would kind of go up in a corner and do my own thing.
I got you. Yeah, that was as I got bigger, so did my play areas. They kind of I'd start out, or I'd have like outside areas, like because there was dirt and sand outside, so like okay, that's a desert area. This is that, and then ultimately something would get left somewhere, and I'd finish out my playthrough. I'd be like, okay, battle's over, good guys won, and then I'd go downstairs for a glass of milk or something, like, oh yeah, this was my underwater team in the sink, totally forgot. So then by then all the water in the sink is cold and all that, and you have food particles floating around in it. But so what would you say was I don't know, I guess for lack of a better phrase, like the golden age of playing? Like what was kind of like the last time that you played with your action figures, or the best time to play with your action figures? Like what age would you say?
I'd say 76 to 79. So I was 9 to 11. That would have been the golden age, because I think 1980, I turned 13. Empire Strikes Back came out. I would consider that the start of my adult collecting phase.
Mm-hmm.
Because at 13, I wasn't playing with toys, but I still wanted the toys. I was starting to set them up on shelves like that, like we all do. So that's sort of when I became an adult collector. So I think after Star Wars, sometime between Star Wars and Empire is when I stopped playing. So that late 70s time, when I had Mego, Micronauts, Star Wars, and other lines like Shogun Warriors, with a few I had. Another great line I loved called Super Joe, who was the missing link between 12-inch G.I. Joe and G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero. Super Joe was 8 inches tall, and he only lasted 1 year, and no one remembers him, but I love that line as well. So yeah, 76 to 79 is the last big era of play for me.
That's Brendan Haley says, we had a timber frame sand pit in the backyard. My poor Star Wars figures and toy soldiers would get stuck in the sand as I filled the box with hose water. Clearly water fields were big. And when I hear sandbox, like an outside sandbox, I'm like, yeah, it's great until you discover like a neighbor's cat turd inside of it. So
Yeah.
It basically become public litter boxes for stray cats. But and here we go. Scott Hughes says, Goji, please talk more about Micronauts. They seem to be an overlooked line. Everyone mentions them, but never really talks about them. They were his 76 and 77 Christmases, an extraordinary line.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Micronauts was so versatile because of the interchangeability. And I think for me, they really took off when Mego started designing their own figures rather than adopting Microman. Because when Mego started doing it, they did the Aliens line. I don't know if you've seen those. Membros, Antron, Repto. These really weird looking figures. Because I always gravitated towards aliens and creatures more than anything. So when Micronauts started introducing more creature-oriented figures, that was, that was great. That was fantastic. So, yeah, and they had some fantastic-looking vehicles. The Terrafant, which was this giant mechanical mammoth that shot water, and there was another one called the Hornetroid, which is a giant wasp that the figures could get in his head was a cockpit, so you could sit the figures in it and fly them around. He had a flapping wing action. Micronauts were great. The problem is they were very fragile, and a lot of them, despite my best efforts, I had a lot of broken and cracked parts just from playing with them. As gently as I could, they still broke. But I still love the line. A lot of very creative designs in that line. Plus the comic book. The comic book that Marvel was publishing for Micronauts, which lasted several years past the line, that was huge in establishing the mythology for me. And probably half of why I love Micronauts is because of the comic, as well as the toys.
Yeah. I've only seen one, like, I guess what you would call like a normal Micronaut. I've only seen one of those like in person one time. And the hands were snapped clean off, and he was all floppy and loose. And I was like, I don't know how much it's going to cost me to find new hands, so I didn't get him. But there was one, I'm sure you know the name, but we saw him at Toy Vault. He's the big black robot that's like magnets that hold him together.
Baron Karza, he's the main villain.
Okay, I've seen him available more times in the last like 5 months than I've seen any other Micronauts ever, because the one Micronaut I saw was like 2019. And I know like Tony just got him in a donation. We saw him at Toy Vault. Matt Swafford has had one available for a while. I think he might have sold recently, but he seems to be like the one that I can find. But I'm always like, ooh, that's a sticker shock when I see how much he is.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately. But let's see. Oliver Belmonte says, my golden age of vintage toys was 84 to 89. I was playing with G.I. Joe and Motu figures. Yeah. And then these names mean something to you. They don't mean anything to me. But Rick Jones says, Baron Karza wasn't in scale with Acro Year.
Right.
Acro. I'm not sure who. I know who Baron Karza is just because you
said
Acroyer.
Yep. Acroyer were the main villains in Microman. The thing with Baron Karza was he wasn't an actual Micronaut, they adapted Baron Karza from another Japanese toy line called Steel Jeeg, and they kind of fit him. And the same way that Transformers took Shockwave and Skylinks from various Japanese lines and pigeonholed them into Transformers, that's what Mego did with Baron Karza. So that's why he wasn't in scale with anyone else.
Gotcha. It was like micro changers and Diaclone and all those lines.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's just funny how that worked. Like even and that trend continued into Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. They had the Die Ranger and all that kind of stuff, and they were all different seasons, and we just mashed them together. And
right.
But I guess different audiences want different things, so it makes sense to me, I guess. And see, Anthony Whitehead says Baron was his only Micronaut. So seems to be a popular. I mean, when you look at him, like when I look at him, like that's a cool looking figure. So
yeah, he was a good one to have.
Yeah. Scott Hughes says Battle Cruiser, Hornetroid, and Rocket Tubes were his favorites. He says, I love the fact that the storyline is that the toys were actual size of the universe and character. Okay, cool. So they're like technically 1-to-1 scale.
Right.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Yes, they came from inner space, and Marvel dubbed it the Microverse. And I think what they're doing in the MCU now, the Quantum Realm, is sort of like the MCU version of the Microverse.
I was actually about to say that, if they wanted to, they could just shove it into an Ant-Man movie.
Yeah.
So you said that you had a bunch of cousins, right? As one does. Did you have any siblings that were close in age?
No. I have one sister. She is 9 years older than me. So by the time I was, old enough to play with toys, she was getting into her teenage years. So yeah, so I was the only boy in the family, and I was, the only one my age at the time.
I gotcha.
So my mother kind of spoiled me. That's why I had so many toys. My mother always indulged my need for plastic. So I was very lucky. She made sure I had almost everything I wanted. I had good Christmases when I was a kid.
That's my little sister and I were kind of in the same boat. My older siblings are, like they're really close together. There's a big gap, and then there's me and my little sister. And so by the time we were born and like old enough to have memories, we were the youngest of the grandkids. Like great grandkids hadn't shown up yet. We were in this kind of sweet spot for about a decade and a half, where grandma was just like just buying us stuff all the time. The great spoiler is what I call her, because she just bought stuff. But,
as grandparents should.
Yeah. Anytime that there was like, Christmas, this is from Santa, and I got to a certain age, I'm like, you mean grandma? Like,
yeah. You're not fooling me.
That's right. Like there's I think it's there was a toy memory I shared in a video recently where I had this giant Fisher Price castle, and I remember it being from Santa, and I was like pretty sure grandma helped with that one. But so I'll have to kind of reframe my normal question about siblings. You had a bunch of, were your cousins around your age, or were you just the baby of the family overall?
I had one cousin that was same as me, a girl. So we really didn't play with the same toys that much. I did get her into comic books though. So when she came over my house, she gravitated toward the Fantastic Four. So she would read through my entire Fantastic Four run every time we were together. So we shared that, but not toys.
I gotcha. So you were kind of a lone kid when it came to playtime. So
yeah, I mean there was friends in the neighborhood. Sometimes friends would come over, and but like I said, I hated getting my toys dirty or broken, so it wasn't that often.
That's right. There was.
I was kind of stingy.
Yeah, it seemed like there was always that kid that I wouldn't say had, like, I know it has a different connotation now, but there's always that one kid that had like sticky fingers that, like, whenever they came over and played, your fingers were just gross afterwards.
Yeah,
like, does this kid not wash their hands? Like they'd eat like a peanut butter jelly sandwich just covered in stick, and they'd just be manhandling stuff. Ugh.
They just finished off a box of popsicles on a warm day and then came over to play.
Exactly. Oliver Belmonte asks Sal Gojitron, are there any vintage toy you wanted so badly as a kid that you had to save up from your allowance? In 1989, he saved up for 3 months to get the Coleco Rambo Black Dragon toy.
No. I usually, when I wanted something big, I just waited till Christmas and I put it on my list.
Yeah.
I really didn't have. When I had pocket money as a kid, it mostly went to comic books on a regular basis, not toys.
Mm-hmm. I never got an allowance as a kid. Like sometimes any money I did get would be from a birthday or a Christmas from like a out of town aunt or uncle that you see once a year, maybe if you're lucky.
Yep.
The only thing that comes to mind for me, I remember when Phantom Menace came out, Maul's double-sided lightsaber was available, and I
Hmm.
wanted that toy so damn bad, and I distinctly remember it being $30, and I remember begging and begging and begging for that. And my dad was like, "Well, you have to save up your allowance money." And I was like, "Dad, I don't get an allowance." He's like, "All right, well, I'll give you $1 a week." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And in my brain, I'm like, "That's like a year from now."
Yeah. It's going to be out of stock by then.
Yeah, yeah. Never did get that toy. Never did get that allowance either, as it turns out. But and Tree Theodore has a super chat. Thank you, sir. He says, "Great to see you both. I had the red. I'm going to keep saying acro year in
Hmm.
76, 77. Happy holidays."
Yep.
So
I had that one
Tree,
too.
yeah, Tree recently did a live stream with Dean and Michael and Tony on the All Things 80s channel, which was a lot of fun to watch and listen to.
Hmm.
So Bjorn chimes in and says, "All my cousins were girls, and my brother was a few years older than me, so I just played with the neighborhood kids."
Hmm.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I don't know if you experienced this or not. At least where I lived, usually what school you went to was dictated by where you lived. Like you fell within
Yes.
a district or whatever. But there were
Yep.
still kids in my neighborhood that I'm like, I don't go to school with this guy. Like you just know them because they live in the same area as you, but they don't go to the same school.
Hmm.
So I just think that's kind of a weird phenomenon. But I guess now it's like, oh, you have to like apply and take entrance exams even as an elementary schooler. I'm like, that's just too much.
Yeah.
But whatever. So let's see here. Okay. So we pretty much have burned through all those. So let's see. Micronauts were a lot of fun. You said that was.
Yes.
I want to talk about the kaiju, the Godzillas and
Hmm.
all that. Like, how did you get into
Yes.
Godzilla?
Indirectly. So
Hmm.
back in grade school, I want to say fourth, fifth grade, every once in a while they would take the student body, file us into the auditorium for the afternoon, and show a movie on the old, reel-to-reel projectors. I assume this was during a teacher conference day, and they had to keep us occupied. These days, they just send the kids home early and make them the parents' problem. But back then, they took responsibility and entertained us.
Hmm.
So one time they showed us it was a really weird eclectic assortment of movies. One day we watched The Creature from the Black Lagoon,
That's a good
and that
one.
was the first time I saw a monster movie.
Hmm.
So after that, I was like, huh, that's pretty good. Let me explore more of that. And from watching after school cartoons, I always saw the promos for the show on Saturday called Creature Double Feature. They
Hmm.
showed it every Saturday afternoon between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. Two movies, obviously, double feature. And they would show the old Universal monsters, Hammer horror, all the atomic monsters from the 50s, and Godzilla was in heavy rotation
Hmm.
in that show. So I started watching Creature Double Feature, and Godzilla just jumped out at me, spoke to me. He became my favorite through that. So I met Godzilla through the Creature,
Nice.
and after that, I think 77 around there was a little bit of a renaissance in the U.S. of Godzilla. You had the Hanna-Barbera cartoon come out around
Hmm.
then, the Marvel comic, and then the Shogun Warrior, the big one, was released in 78. And there
Hmm.
was also an adjacent line that Mattel did called Godzilla's Gang, which
Hmm.
was a series of 5-inch tall vinyl monsters, Godzilla being one of them, and the rest of the monsters in the line were from the Ultraman line. So I collected all those. I collected everything that I asked for everything that had Godzilla on it. I had puzzles, I had coloring books, I had a really cool play set from a company called HG Toys. It was called Godzilla versus the Tricephalon Monster, and it was like a toy soldier scale hard plastic, solid plastic Godzilla. He had an enemy called Tricephalon, who was basically King Ghidorah without wings.
Mm-hmm.
And in the playset, there was a cardboard backdrop of a city under siege, a bunch of army guys, military guys, and one unique thing about this playset was they had little citizen figures as well in various stages of running away. So it was a pretty cool set to have.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was just kind of immersed in Godzilla in the late '70s, and he just stuck with me my whole life.
So, yeah, as we know, superheroes have many, many costumes. So you say like
Mhm.
Batman, they're like, oh, I think blue and gray, or I think black on gray. When someone
Yeah,
says Godzilla, which era Godzilla manifests in your mind first?
probably the Marvel comic because that's the one that had the most impact on me when I was a kid. Which is funny because the Marvel Godzilla looks nothing like the movie Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
Movie Godzilla was charcoal gray. The Marvel comic, just like the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, was bright green.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the Marvel comic one had these like solid red eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and he breathed fire instead of atomic radiation. But I still love that comic because in that comic he was set in the Marvel universe. He was interacting with the Marvel superheroes. So
Okay.
toward the end of the series, Godzilla fought the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, which I
Wow.
think is the last time Godzilla crossed over with another franchise. It was
Mm-hmm.
back in 1979.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that was yeah. So when you say Godzilla, the Marvel comic, and after that, probably the suit they used in Destroy All Monsters because that is my favorite Godzilla film
Mm-hmm.
from my childhood and still to this day because that was like the Avengers of Godzilla movies. Toho took kaiju from like 7 or 8 different films, put them all into one, and did this great crossover. And that's the one movie I always made sure I was home for when it came up in the rotation on Creature Double Feature. I always wanted to see Destroy All Monsters because, of
Mm-hmm.
course, that was the days before home video.
Right.
So if you didn't see it when it aired, you had to wait till it came up in the rotation again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like an Avengers level event with all the
Yes.
monsters. And that's
Yep.
you would have to tell me because I was just alive for it. Like I don't know what would have caused it, but there was like a resurgence of Godzilla in the '90s,
Yes.
um, and that's when I became like I kind of knew who Godzilla was just through like cultural reference and different shows and things like that. But it was
Yep.
like he made like a big comeback,
Yes.
and if I had to wager a guess, I would say it's probably the Matthew Broderick movie. He's probably what started all that. Like they were bringing him back, which obviously has a very different design. I remember the Taco Bell tie-in, but I'd imagine the two are probably related. Like maybe it was a manufactured comeback because they were gearing up for that movie or something. Or
Yeah. Well, a little before that, the last Godzilla movie of the original era was in 1975. Then he
Mhm.
took 10 years off and came back, or 9 years off, came back in 1984. And that Godzilla Returns was translated for America called Godzilla 1985. And they added clips of Raymond Burr, who was in the original American version of Godzilla. They released that into theaters with a big promotion with Dr. Pepper. And that sort of started the modern era of Godzilla. After that, Toho continued with movies into the 90s. And while Toho was making those movies in the 90s, Dark Horse Comics got the license for Godzilla to publish comics in the US, and Trendmasters began their Godzilla line of toys. And that all happened before the '98 Matthew Broderick movie. I
Mhm.
think the Matthew Broderick movie kind of brought Godzilla's resurgence to a screeching halt at the end of the '90s because
Yeah.
it sucked so badly and the toy line was so terrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that whole Godzilla '90s thing started in Japan and
Okay.
came to America before that whole TriStar disaster.
Gotcha. So there's a toy line So when I think of Godzilla, I think of one that's like a very dark green, almost black, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think it's just the design of them in the '90s.
Mhm.
But there was a toy line, and you'd have to, I don't know, give people the Reader's Digest version.
Mhm.
I remember the card backs, but I don't remember the monsters. I remember the people being like these weird space armor things. Like there was a chick with like white and silver armor. There was a dude that was
Right.
like blue and silver, I think.
Yeah. So Trendmasters created this team of humans called G-Force that would
Mhm.
fight Godzilla, and I think they were just kind of piggybacking on Power Rangers at that time.
Okay.
They were kind of throwing in humans in the line that kind of had Power Rangers looking armor,
Mhm.
and they weren't very interesting at the end of the day. When
Mhm.
that Godzilla line, you really wanted monster versus monster action. The
Mhm.
humans were kind of superfluous.
Right. As they are in every movie. No one watches kaiju movies for the humans.
No.
So, which I found interesting in the, I guess, contemporary Godzilla, not Shin Godzilla, but like the contemporary American films, where the
Hmm.
first one, I think it was like 2014 with Bryan Cranston, people said that there was too much humans, not enough
Yeah.
Godzilla. So then for Godzilla
Right.
King of the Monsters, they were like, all right, more monsters, less humans. People were like, there's no story here. I'm like,
Yeah.
what do you want? So,
Yeah. That's why if you're a Godzilla fan, you pretty much ignore the mainstream media and movie reviewers because they mean nothing. No movie reviewer is ever going to be satisfied with a kaiju movie.
so I'm gonna say this again as an admitted normie for Godzilla,
Mhm.
because I clearly here in front of the master talking about Godzilla. I think the best Godzilla movie to come out in the last decade is probably King Kong versus Godzilla. I enjoyed that quite a bit, mostly
Mhm.
because they had a daytime battle and you could see them.
Yeah.
Holy shit! Like
Hmm.
that was my complaint with uh, the first Godzilla that, or not first, but the Bryan Cranston one, was
Right.
the Muto. I always want to say Motu. The Muto were
Hmm.
black. You couldn't see them in the battles, and it was like
Right.
all dark and raining. And you're like, okay, I get it. You don't want to actually animate this stuff. You want to try and cut a bunch of corners, be lazy. But it's like
Yeah.
I want to see Godzilla, not black screen with
Right.
roars and lightning. I guess.
And then that director kept making the choice of showing the monsters leading up to the battle and then
Hmm.
cutting away and showing you the aftermath. And it's,
Right.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
That's not the point of a monster movie. You want to see them fight and destroy things.
Hmm.
He tried to get a little too artsy with that film, and to the film's detriment.
Yeah. So, what would you say is the best Godzilla movie that's come out in the last, I don't know, 20 years?
I mean, I personally enjoyed King of the Monsters, the one
Hmm.
that preceded Godzilla versus Kong with Ghidorah, Rodan, and Mothra.
Hmm.
There was a lot of callbacks to the original Japanese films that probably the casual viewer wouldn't get. I got. There was
Hmm.
a lot of callbacks to the original music cues from the 1960s.
Hmm.
And I think that one really respected the original Japanese mythology,
Hmm.
which is something that, the Matthew Broderick one obviously didn't do.
Hmm.
And of course, in Godzilla King of the Monsters, you also got some good battles. Rodan versus Mothra, Godzilla versus Ghidorah.
Hmm.
So I really enjoyed that one. Godzilla versus Kong was good too. The origin of Mecha Godzilla was kind of stupid. Didn't make
Yeah.
a lot of sense.
Yeah, we're gonna
Uh,
take King Ghidorah's DNA and put it into a robot.
yeah,
Yeah, that was a bit of a stretch. It's like, couldn't you just, I don't know, use that, like, suspend your disbelief. We've been building this robot this whole time. Like,
hmm
I mean, I don't know. That seemed a little silly to me.
yeah, and I don't know how Sarazawa was mentally connecting with a skull. It
Right.
did the science doesn't make sense with that.
Yeah. They wanted to suspend our disbelief in a different direction. That was even more
Yeah.
difficult.
Mhm.
Um, so as the ultimate Godzilla fan, which kaiju do you think is the most underappreciated or underutilized and you would like to see make a comeback?
Anguirus,
Angerus? You'll
Anguirus, angry.
have to give me a
So
description.
Anguirus is the one with all the spikes on his back. He looks like a porcupine or an armadillo.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, he's the plucky one. He's the one that always starts a fight, gets the crap beat out of him, goes away, licks his wounds, and comes back. He's the plucky one.
Good for him.
But I like him.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Godzilla Final War?
Mm-mm.
Okay, that's a movie you have to watch. Came out in 2004. That was the 50th anniversary Godzilla film in Japan. The last big film they did. The only one they did after that was Shin Godzilla. Yeah. But Godzilla Final War is like the kitchen sink Godzilla movie in Japan. It has over a dozen monsters and all kinds of stuff from the 50-year mythology just thrown into it. It's kind of it's a lot, but I think it's a lot of fun.
Okay. Bob Squad says Biolante or Biolante for me. Is that the giant plant looking thing with the huge mouth?
Yeah. Yep.
That scared the ever living shit out of me as a kid. It was terrifying.
Yep.
To this day, it makes me uneasy to look at it. I'm like, oh, I don't know. But the
there we go.
Yeah, that thing. Ugh.
Yep.
Like that's stuff of nightmares right there.
It's a unique design. I like this design. They did something different. And they made a plant-based kaiju, which is unusual.
Yeah. That's my favorite one is it pronounced Gigan or Gigan?
Gigan, yes.
Gigan, yeah. He's my favorite. Always has been. Yep. That little guy right there.
Is the one that Sal gifted to me.
Yep.
Trendmaster's Gigan. Yeah, he's a cyborg. He's a cyborg kaiju from space.
Yep. Doesn't get more complicated than that.
He's a classic.
Yeah. And Oliver Belmonte actually brings up something I was about to talk about. He asked, did Godzilla ever team up with Ultraman to make kaiju monsters? I thought I saw one when he was 25.
Godzilla crossed over with a Sentai series called Zone Fighter back in the 70s. I don't know if he's ever crossed over with Ultraman. Zone Fighter was very similar to Ultraman. He just didn't have a big franchise like Ultraman. But I don't recall an Ultraman crossover with Godzilla. So you may be thinking of Zone Fighter.
Which is a shame because I would love to see Godzilla fight my other favorite kaiju, Bogan.
Mm-hmm.
Such a stupid character design. I love him so much.
Bogan's got a head on his neck.
Yep.
And a head on his other neck.
Yep. It makes no sense. There's nothing about that character design that would make him a formidable foe. Because you're like, he's not moving anywhere fast. So, and weirdly enough, the toy design looks better than the actual design from the live action. But he just whips that thing on top of his head around. It's such a weird. Like I look at it. You see someone like King Ghidorah, or you see someone like Gigan, you're like, okay, you can kind of see how a person would fit in that suit. I look at Bogan, I'm like, how did that? There had to be like someone on their belly crawling forward with someone walking behind them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So some of the guys in those suits get into some really weird positions. Like if you look at Anguirus from the 60s and 70s movies, he's actually not walking on all fours. He's walking on his front legs and his rear knees because that's how the guy was able to fit into the suit.
That makes sense. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many crossovers with Godzilla that just makes sense. But I don't know.
Toho is very stingy with their IP, and I think they charge a lot to license it too, which is why we didn't get any other monsters in the Mattel line or the Marvel comic or the Dark Horse comic, because Toho charges individual licensing fees for every monster.
Oh wow!
It's not like when Sony got Spider-Man, they got all the characters. If you license Godzilla from Toho, you get just Godzilla. You want anybody else, you got to pony up the yen.
I got you. Yeah, there was So you'll have to tell me this or not, but there's a particular kaiju that I've seen a couple of his movies, and I love this particular character. And the three or four that I've seen, they're always so bad that they're good, and that's
Hmm.
Gamera.
Yes,
Is he part of the Toho universe, or is he a standalone kind of
he
thing?
was he was a competitor. The studio that created him was Daiei,
Hmm.
and he was a competitor for Godzilla back in the '60s and early '70s. But
Okay.
yeah, those '60s Gamera movies, they deserve to be on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah. There.
They're not
That's.
good. But I'll tell you, the Gamera did make a '90s comeback as well. He
Hmm.
had a trilogy of movies from '95 to '99, which I believe are on streaming on Amazon Prime right now. They are really good.
Oh, okay.
They completely revamped the character and made it serious and not silly.
Hmm.
And they got rid of all the little kids that used to
Yep.
follow him around. Like, Gamera. Yeah,
But
yeah, none of
Gamera is
that.
a champion for children,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
none of that. The
yeah.
Gamera movies from the '90s, I highly recommend.
Okay. I'll have to
Yeah,
check him out because I loved the ones from I guess the '70s is when he was made. I don't know,
yeah,
but
'60s, '70s.
they are a special kind of bad. Like I don't
Yes,
know, like
absolutely.
it's not even just the acting. Like the translations are pretty bad. Like he'll be in
Hmm.
the middle of a fight or something, and like it's okay. Gamera protects the children. He'll like stop and like break the fourth wall, and you're just like, what is going on here?
Hmm. Yep.
It's it's basically he's a giant space turtle that walks on his hind legs and has like a rhino
Right.
horn. I'm pretty sure.
Right. And he's jet propelled and
Yeah,
turns into a flying saucer.
he does. He does,
Hmm.
and it's
Ridiculous.
yeah. They spared no expense, but yeah, old Gamera.
He does have his following, though.
Yep, I
I think
believe
I think the number one fantasy fight that kaiju fans want to see is Godzilla versus Gamera.
I believe it.
Mhm.
The it's always like I think Michael has talked about it before, but it's always like oh, like Superman versus I don't know another hero or He-Man versus Superman. It's like everyone wants to see
Mhm.
the good guys fight each other.
Right.
So, but so Godzilla at his inception was the villain, correct? And his very first movie, it was like okay. So
Yes.
at what point did he transition over to be like now in the lexicon, like in our brains, Godzilla is the
Mhm.
hero? So at what point then would that did that transition take place? And how which has lasted longer? Has he been a villain for the most of his time, or has he pretty much been a hero this whole time?
So in the original Japanese series, he transitioned to hero in his fifth movie, and there were 15 films in that series.
Hmm.
So he was a hero for 2/3 of that. They brought him back in '84. He was the villain again, and he pretty much remained the villain, or at least an anti-hero, throughout that whole series.
Hmm.
And then in the Millennium Series, which is the third series of Godzilla films that began in '99 to '04, he was mostly a villain in those as well.
Okay.
So he's been more bad than good,
Okay.
because it's really hard to take seriously a kaiju hero,
Hmm.
because they're so, how are they going to save us? They're so big. Like in the Gamera '90 series, he's presented as the protector of the Earth, but
Hmm.
not necessarily the protector of humanity. So if
Gotcha.
there's an enemy monster in the middle of the city, he's going to fly into the city, crush the buildings, crush the people, kill the other monster, and we're just sort of collateral damage. So
Gotcha. That kind of
yeah,
makes
I, I
more
think
sense.
I think he's been mostly villain.
Gotcha.
I mean, obviously in the Hanna-Barbera show, he was presented as this superhero, but in
Right.
the Marvel comic, he was definitely the antagonist.
Now that you say that, because I wasn't aware of that with the Gamera, I feel like
Hmm.
maybe that's where the new Godzilla trilogy kind of took its cues from, where Godzilla doesn't protect humanity; he's protecting the Earth.
Yeah,
So that seems
yeah. I
kind of
mean, he's the realistic way to present kaiju are that they're protecting their territory, which is the Earth. just like any animal would protect their territory. But they're so big and powerful, the entire Earth is their territory. And they kind of played with that in Godzilla versus Kong, where they're both the alphas.
Right.
And if Godzilla knew of Kong, he's going to go for him. This is my this is my tree to piss on. I'm going to kill you.
Right. Yeah, I liked that whole how they did that. It's like, oh yeah, they've been fighting for centuries, and it was interesting. The whole Hollow Earth thing was kind of fascinating. Which I don't know if kind of the general consensus on the movie, but I very much enjoyed Kong Skull Island. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
So just kind of I liked all the winks and nods to like Monarch and all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of fun, that movie. Plus, I wasn't Jeff Goldblum, John Goodman. Great cast. The one movie I can tolerate Brie Larson in. But
yeah. And anything with Sam Jackson in it, it's a winner. Even though he plays basically the same pissed off character in every role, he's always good at it.
Did it again. So we're coming up on the hour and a half mark, and I'm gonna go ahead and grab this. Okay, it's gonna make me do it the long way. All right. So Tony's stream is starting in about 30 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and drop the link here in the chat for everybody. There you go. So, not that anyone here needs me to tell them that, but, I encourage everyone to head over there after this, because we'll probably go for another 5 to 10 minutes. That way we have a potty break and food break in between. But I've had a lot of fun. There's one thing that I like to do, and I'm sure you're aware. You've seen the show before, and Michael Schaefer, if you're watching, you better start thinking, because Michael Schaefer's agreed to come on in January. Go ahead and tell people that.
Cool.
So, I told him Mr. Walken is welcome to come too if he would like. But I'll kind of cut out the dog and pony dance, the show, all that stuff, because you're familiar with what I'm going to ask. Is your favorite month, your favorite number, and all that kind of stuff?
I would say it's a summer, and it's a Saturday, and I'm 8 years old.
Yep.
So I'm going to get up. I'm going to get my cereal. Going to watch my cartoons, Super Friends, whatever else was on at that time. Probably Scooby-Doo. Maybe the Plastic Man Comedy Adventure Show or the Fantastic Four, something like that. Watch cartoons till noon. Have my Migos with me in front of the TV. So I always like to have my toys with me when I was watching TV. Go till about noon, take a break, have some lunch, and then right back at 1 o'clock for Creature Double Feature.
Right on. That's that the toys in front of the TV thing. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I used to do that. I'm like, nope. I still do that. I still do that. Like, I've had this Ram Man axe in my hand this whole time, just doing this. my hands.
You can have something.
My hands need something to do. So and I would sit there, like, I wouldn't necessarily play with my toys in front of the TV. I would sometimes, but I would just sit there and just kind of move them around. Like, I don't talk about them a lot on the channel, but I have a lot of the Toy Biz X-Men that are about the size of this Michelangelo. And if you grab them by the arms, like on their upper shoulders, you can spin them around. And I would just sit there and just spin them around just by the shoulders. I had a 10-inch Venom. I got him for my birthday. I'll never forget. That was one of my favorite things to do, was just grab them by the shoulder, just kind of spin them around, because they would just rotate that way. Somehow in my brain, I forgot how I did that, and I grabbed him by the legs and tried to just broke his left leg just clean off. Just snapped it at the peg. Had him for a whole day before I broke him. So, dumb. But
one thing I did do, seeing as it's a holiday time of the year, back in the 70s, Marvel would put out these treasury editions, these giant oversized comic books. I don't know if you've ever seen them.
Mhm.
Every year they do a Christmas special, and they'd have artwork on the cover of Marvel heroes and various Christmas theme scenes.
Mhm.
And one year they had a drawing of Ben Grimm dressed up as Santa Claus in Santa's sleigh, and the Hulk and Thor were the reindeer pulling the sleigh, and all the other superheroes were around it.
Mhm.
So for a few Christmases with my Migos, I would recreate that scene in my room. I made a Santa suit for my Ben Grimm, my
Mhm.
Migo Ben Grimm. I found this little plastic sled. I'd sit him in, and I'd get the Hulk and Thor and set them up as the reindeer, and I put a Christmas tree up, and I would make a little holiday scene in my room out of my Migos.
Nice. When you said Ben Grimm dressed up as Santa, I'm like, did the people who made that did they know? Did no? Okay. So for those that don't
Yeah,
know,
I think that I'm not sure. I think that came later.
okay, I was gonna say then that
Yeah.
then I was gonna say for those that don't know, Ben Grimm at least now he's Jewish. So I'm like,
Yes, he's canonically Jewish now. I'm not sure when that was specifically stated. I think it
okay,
was maybe in the 80s. I'm not
gotcha.
sure. I mean, probably Kirby meant for him to be Jewish the whole time because Ben Grimm was the character that Kirby most identified with of his own self-created characters. So Kirby being Jewish, I assume he meant for Ben to be Jewish as well. I
Gotcha.
don't know. I don't know when
Yeah,
it came into canon though.
yeah. That's I have a feeling it's probably like from the beginning that was intended, but just wasn't outright
Yeah.
said.
Hmm.
So there's one final thing I want to talk about,
Hmm.
and I can't fit him on screen because he's too big. Um, I would say I only bring this up because I know that you have him too. One of the one of my favorite contemporary toy lines is the Raw 10 figures.
Yes.
Like they're 5 POA if that, but there's
Hmm.
something about them that's just so freaking cool.
Yep.
Like the sculpts, paints, and all that, but they're perfect for giant kaiju and playtime.
Right.
And that's what most of this collecting is about for me. Especially like my
Hmm.
channel, I review toys, I do modern, all that kind of stuff. But predominantly, when I do these toy reviews, I'm not looking at them like, oh, like this is He-Man, and it's not as good as this figure because I'm not looking at them as collectibles necessarily. I'm looking at them as toys. Like, would this be
Yes.
fun to play with?
Right.
Because things like Raw 10, they kind of kick the dust off the tires of that old imagination and get wheels turning. Like, oh man, this is I would have like I basically hallucinate inside of the store and run through a played scenario from when I was 10 or whatever.
Yep. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
uh,
Those are great.
yeah.
There's
Do
another line too. I don't know if you've seen this other line called BAM, Beasts, Aliens, and Mechs. It's from Jax,
Mm-mm.
and they're these 12-inch tall figures, and there's one of each. There's a beast, which is like a giant werewolf. There's an alien that kind of looks like a xenomorph without the tail, and then there's a mech that's sort of a Pacific Rim looking robot. And those
Mm-hmm.
are pretty cool too. I have those as well. They're kind of along the same lines as Raw 10, where they're just not associated with anything else. They're just these three creatures, and you can get them and have them fight GI Joe or He Man or Marvel Legends,
Nice.
whatever you want. Hmm.
Yeah, I'll have to check them out. So, final
Mm-hmm.
question of the night is going to go to Uncle Deluxe. He says,
Yes.
one more
Hi, Eric.
question for Godry. Your ideal fate for Godzuki.
I think this is a family show, so I really can't say.
It's not.
Uh, I hated that little bastard. He was terrible. He was absolutely terrible. Is he on my? Yeah, he's on my shirt. Yeah, Godzuki,
Yep.
Godzilla's nephew. Yeah, I really hated that guy. I don't like any of the sidekick type characters, the comedy characters. I know they're supposed to be the children's point of view characters, but I could never stand them.
Yeah.
Godzuki, Scrappy Doo, T Bob,
Mm-hmm.
Snarf. They can all burn in hell.
Yeah. That's
I don't like them at all.
when I see the character design for Godzuki, I think of Lumpy from the Christmas special.
Yeah.
So, like just in the way that the eyes and the face and all that looks. So,
Hmm.
But is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we did not cover tonight?
I don't think so.
Alrighty.
I don't think
Well,
so. You were steering the ship. I let you steer.
well, I hope that you had some fun and that it was
I did.
enjoyable.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
like I tell every guest, just because you come on the one time doesn't mean you can't come back. I encourage
Mhm.
repeat offenders, so to speak. I haven't had any yet. Not that people are interested, but I want to try and get a few episodes in before I start bringing people back on. But
Yep.
I am very much enjoying this series. I've said before, it's my favorite thing to do on the channel, just because it's low impact and we get to talk about toys and memories without having to be like, oh well, on this. Well, I mean, I kind of did it to you though. Well, on this specific year, and this, the wind was blowing in from the east, and that's when so and so had the idea to make a sandwich, and then they, without having to get super detailed and everything. But for one last time, where can the fine people at home find you on the internet?
Instagram at Gojitron.
Yep.
I don't know if I'll make videos at some point. Maybe I will. I don't know.
You might
I may be bitten by the bug.
Yeah, so you might get adopted by the Chasing 80s crew. So
I don't know.
Over there. Lots of familiar names.
And you mentioned Dean's Christmas live streams.
Yep.
You'll probably see me on one of those in the near future.
Oh boy. Dean's one of those I'm trying to get on here. I have a bad habit of reaching out to people. I mean, like, yeah, and then kind of forgetting that I asked them, and then enough time goes by, I'm like, I need to do another one of those episodes, and I'm like when I invited you back, I'm like, have I invited you before? I don't know. So, but so I'm Sal. You know where to find me. You're right here. Again, the link was put in the chat for Analog Toys, which starts in about 15 minutes. So I thank everyone for stopping by and hanging out. I hope it was a lot of fun for everyone, and we will see you
Thanks, everybody.
next time.